Did you know there was a sequel to the Super Game Boy 2, or an official Super Famicom multi-cart? Take a look and stay tuned for today's episode. We're going to cover these and more.
Everyone knows about the Super Game Boy for Super Nintendo, but did you know that they actually made a second version? Let's check it out. This is called the Super Game Boy 2. It was exclusively released in Japan to solve a few of the problems that the original Super Game Boy had. The first and foremost being the absence of this little guy here. The first Super Game Boy was sorely missing the link cable port, and it was one of the biggest aspects that people criticized it for. Other than that, most people were probably quite happy with their original Super Game Boy. The games with exclusive Super Game Boy features were cool, the color palettes were fun to mess with, and just being able to play on the big screen was great. However, the real big issue that plagued the original was something that most people probably didn't even know of. The original Super Game Boy ran at 4.295 megahertz. What this basically meant was that Game Boy games on the Super Nintendo were running 2.5 times faster than they were intended to. Like I said, most people probably didn't even notice this, but for a small yet dedicated group of people, it makes a big difference. For example, if you played a game for dozens of hours and then tried to do the same jump on the big screen, it would probably feel a lot different and your timing could be all off. This was the other big change that was made for the Super Game Boy 2. There's no video stutter, the audio sounds correct, and most importantly, it feels correct. The original Game Boy ran at 4.194 megahertz, and thankfully, so does the Super Game Boy 2. Additionally, there were 5 new game borders that were added for the second release. But that's about it. One of the biggest criticisms of the Super Game Boy 2 was that it didn't have a lot of big changes to justify its sequel name. If it had supported Game Boy Color games, it might have felt like a proper sequel, rather than just a small upgrade. Did you ever want to print out Pokédex entries straight from your Game Boy? How about scenes from Link's Awakening? With this device, you can. This is called the Game Boy Printer, or the Pocket Printer in Japan. It released in 1998 as an accessory for the original Game Boy line of handheld consoles. By using the link cable, you were able to print out various images from compatible games. The most advertised and probably most used game was the Game Boy Camera, or Pocket Camera in Japan. Without diving into this device too much, you were able to take digital photos with your Game Boy, do a number of different things such as add stickers, play games, and share with a friend, but most notable, you could print them. Lots of people loved this camera and still use it today in a lot of interesting ways. Getting back to the Game Boy printer, this is a thermal-based printer, meaning that it doesn't use ink, but rather requires special thermal paper to print on, similar to receipt paper actually. The quality was never that great to begin with, and due to the fact that it used thermal paper, after many years, these stickers would fade pretty quickly. After release, a number of different games supported the device in a number of different ways. There are a total of 100 different games that supported the peripheral, with some notable ones being the Pokemon series, Super Mario Deluxe, Pokemon trading card game, Donkey Kong Country, Harvest Moon, Puyo Puyo, and more. The unfortunate thing, however, is that most supported games were Japanese exclusive, and only around 30 of them made their way to the West. The Game Boy never had any sort of region locking though, so if you were able to get your hands on these Japanese games, it would work fine with any Game Boy and any Game Boy printer. And that's pretty much it. This ultimately amounted for a fun way for kids to have instant photography in an age where that wasn't really accessible as it is today. Taking photos and printing them and then giving them to your friends was fun, and printing out certain facts and games was neat too. Everyone knows about these NES cartridges that were made for the GBA. But did you know that you can play these cartridges on your GBA? Let's take a look. This is called the Fami 8-bit game adapter from GameTech. This interesting device was released all the way back in 2004 and was advertised as a way to play your old Famicom games on GBA or GBA SP. While that sounds great and all, it has a number of difficulties associated with it, naturally just by design. First and foremost is the resolution of the GBA screen. The native output of Famicom and NES games just doesn't match it at all, so images often feel squished or stretched, and some of the text is just completely illegible. Secondly, a large number of games are just not compatible with the device. Any game requiring the player 2 microphone is out, or 2-player games in general. Peripheral-specific games like Duck Hunt are out, and even some games with specific mappers, such as homebrew titles, won't work either. Finally, the audio isn't even pushed through the Game Boy Advance speaker, but plays via its own built-in speaker. There are a lot of negatives that can be said about the device all said and done. Not to mention mention the fact that it needs its own set of 4 AA batteries to run, and it only allows for 5 hours of playtime. But what this does, however, is show something new that no other device has done before. In 2004, it must have been a really neat thing to be able to break out your own Famicom games and take them with you on the go. Back in those days, you didn't have portable emulation devices like we have these days, or even portable Famicoms. These may not have been commercially successful, but it's still really cool to see what was being done back in those days, and especially compare it with the kind of experiences companies are making these days. Playing your home console games on the go was a dream scenario decades ago, but these days, you can play nearly anything portably. Let's take a look at a brand new device that allows you to play Famicom and NES games on the go. This is called the 8-Bit Pocket from Columbus Circle. They initially released this device in 2018, and over the years have released a few new additions. The first one simply included an AC adapter. The version 2 added a textured back for better grip and USB-C charging instead of the original barrel jack. Despite those changes, however, the system itself, as well as the 2.8-inch LCD screen, haven't changed at all. These devices are often referred to as a system on a chip, as it condenses the contents of an NES or Famicom into one single chip. That being said though, it's still not an emulation device, which is really nice, and the compatibility on these is phenomenal, as it works with the entire NES Famicom cartridge library, as well as most newly released homebrew titles, and even bizarre aftermarket devices, such as this Famicom Game Boy cartridge. The concept of playing a home console device on the go isn't something new, as both Sega and NEC had released their own portable versions of home consoles with the Sega Nomad and the Turbo Express, respectively. But Nintendo never really had done that in the past. They've consoleized their portable devices with things such as the Super Game Boy and Game Boy Player, but never the other way around. It's really cool to see other companies like Columbus Circle doing things like this. They've released a number of other portable versions of consoles too, such as the NES, Genesis/Mega Drive, and even their own version of the Game Boy Advance. Have you ever seen a multi-cart that looks like this on the Super Nintendo? Well, now you have. This is the Super Famicom Memory Cassette. In Japan, Nintendo had experimented with a number of different services to give players access to games at a discounted price. It all started back with the Famicom Disk System, as owners of those games could bring their games to their local convenience store and rewrite the disc with a brand new game for as little as $5. This multi-cart is essentially the same idea, as owners of the cartridge could bring it to supporting convenience stores such as Lawson and plug it into the service provider dubbed Nintendo Power. No, not that Nintendo Power. This was a flash writer that was installed into convenience stores' multi-purpose floppy machine that was usually used for paying bills and purchasing concert tickets and things like that. The cartridge didn't have any special chipsets such as the Super FX, so it doesn't have 100% compatibility with the SNES catalog, but not every game was available on that service to begin with. There were dozens of games available, and even a handful of Nintendo Power exclusive games, such as Columns, Tamagotchi Town, Dokusei 2, and a number of Picross titles too. The service ended up having a surprisingly long lifespan, as it launched in 1997 and wasn't taken out of convenience stores until 2007. By that point, the Wii was already a year into its life and was offering the same games via its download service, the Virtual Console. Nintendo also had Game Boy Nintendo Power cartridges that ran alongside them for nearly the same length of time.
What did you think of these accessories? Let me know in the comments below, and subscribe for new videos every week.